Walk through a veteran homesteader's garden, and you'll notice something strange. A whole section that never gets dug up, never gets reseeded, never gets a fresh seed packet. That's the part that feeds them for free, year after year, while everyone else is at the garden center reloading. These are the crops a seasoned grower plants once and harvests for a decade or longer. Here are 9 you can put in the ground this year, and still be eating from when your grandkids visit. Most of the vegetables you and I grew up planting are annuals. Tomatoes, beans, lettuce, squash. You buy the seed, you nurse the seedlings, you get 1 season out of them, and then frost takes the whole thing, and you start over the next spring with another trip to the store and another $20 or $30 gone. There's nothing wrong with that, but the gardeners who stopped worrying about grocery prices figured out something else. They built a corner of the garden out of perennial food crops, plants that go dormant in winter and come roaring back on their own every spring. No replanting, no reseeding, no receipt. You spend the money one time. The harvest keeps coming long after you've forgotten what you paid. That is the closest thing to opting out of grocery inflation that exists in a backyard. So let's walk through the 9 I would put in the ground first. Number 9. Asparagus. If you only plant one thing off this entire list, make it asparagus, because nothing else pays you back this long. A single asparagus crown, that little octopus of roots you set in a trench, stays productive for 15 to 20 years and often longer. Think about that against the grocery store, where a thin bundle of asparagus in spring can cost $4 or $5 and last you 1 dinner. A small bed of crowns gives you that same bundle, fresh cut, every few days through the whole spring season, for 2 decades, off a one-time planting. Here is the honest part, and it is the reason most people never grow it. Asparagus makes you wait. You do not harvest much the first year or 2, because the plant needs that time to build a deep, strong root system underground before it can spare any spears for you. Growing guides are firm about this. Let it establish, resist the urge to cut, and from year 3 on it feeds you generously and almost forever. The planting tip that matters most is the trench. Dig a trench about 1 foot deep, set the crowns in the bottom with their roots fanned out. Cover them with just a couple inches of soil at first, and gradually fill the trench in as the shoots grow up through the season. That deep planting is what gives you the long life. And the surprising benefit, beyond the harvest, is that asparagus grows into tall, soft, ferny foliage by summer that looks like a delicate green hedge. People plant ornamental versions of that fern on purpose. Yours feeds you and looks good doing it. Number 8. Rhubarb. Rhubarb might be the longest living food plant you can own. There are rhubarb crowns out there that have been feeding the same family for 50 years or more, handed down like a piece of furniture. It is hardy across roughly zones 3 through 8, which means it shrugs off cold winters that would kill a lot of vegetables. And it is one of the first things up in spring, sending out those thick red and green stalks while the rest of the garden is still bare dirt. For a one-time purchase of a single crown, you get tart, beautiful stalks for pies, sauces, and jams for decades. Rhubarb comes with one rule you have to follow. You eat only the stalks. The leaves of rhubarb are poisonous. Those big, handsome, elephant ear leaves at the top of each stalk are not food. So you cut them off and compost them, and you only ever cook with the stalk itself. That is not a reason to fear the plant. It is just a rule you follow, the same way you would with any number of things in a kitchen. The planting tip is to give it rich soil and room, because a mature rhubarb plant gets big and wide, and to resist harvesting heavily the first year so the crown can settle in. The surprising benefit is how little it asks of you after that. Rhubarb is about as close to plant it and forget as food gardening gets, waking up on its own every single spring without a thing from you. Number 7. Sorrel. Sorrel is one of those plants experienced growers love and beginners have never heard of. It is a leafy perennial green, hardy across roughly zone 4 and warmer, and the leaves have a bright, lemony, almost tangy flavor that wakes up a salad or a soup in a way nothing from the grocery store does. And here is what makes it precious. It is one of the very first greens to push up in early spring, weeks before you could even think about planting lettuce. When you are starved for something fresh and green after a long winter, sorrel is already there, ready to cut. The money math on sorrel is simple. Fresh specialty greens are some of the most expensive things in the produce aisle, and they wilt in your refrigerator within days. One sorrel plant gives you a steady supply of those tangy leaves for years. And the more you pick, the more it produces, because cutting it just encourages fresh new growth. The planting tip that makes it nearly foolproof is that sorrel is not fussy about its spot. It tolerates poor soil and even takes a little shade, so you can tuck it into a corner where pickier vegetables would sulk. The surprising benefit is that lemony tang itself. It comes from the plant naturally, which means you get a bright, citrusy flavor in early spring with no lemon, no cost, and no trip to the store. Number 6. Walking onions. Walking onions, sometimes called Egyptian onions, are one of the cleverest plants in the whole self-sufficiency world because they plant themselves. Instead of flowerings and setting seed the ordinary way, they grow little clusters of bulblets right at the top of their stalks. Those top clusters get heavy, the stalk bends over, the bulblets touch the soil a step away from the parent, and they root and grow into new onions. That is the walking. The plant marches itself a little farther across the bed every year, which is how it earned the name. For a budget gardener, this is close to magic. You buy a small starting set one time, and as long as you leave some bulbs in the ground each year, you will never buy onions for that patch again. They simply keep replacing themselves. You get green onion tops to snip all season for cooking, and small flavorful bulbs to dig as you need them. The planting tip is to give them a permanent spot you do not mind them slowly traveling around in. Rather than a tidy row, you want to keep in straight lines, because travel is what they do. The surprising benefit is how tough they are. Walking onions are hardy and reliable, coming back through hard winters and feeding you the kind of fresh onion flavor that a bag from the store, picked weeks ago and shipped across the country, simply cannot match. Number 5. Lovage. Lovage is a secret weapon, and it is the kind of thing you only learn from someone who has gardened a long time. It is a tall perennial herb that tastes almost exactly like celery, but stronger and richer, and a single plant will season your kitchen for years. If you have ever bought a whole bunch of celery just to use 2 stalks in a soup and watched the rest turn to rubber in the crisper drawer, lovage is the answer to that small, recurring waste. The savings here are the quiet, steady kind. You stop buying celery for flavoring entirely, because one lovage plant supplies all the celery taste you could want for stocks, soups, stews, and salads, and it comes back bigger every spring. You snip what you need, and the plant keeps making more. The planting tip is to give it space in a sunny to partly shaded spot, because lovage gets tall, sometimes shoulder high or more by midsummer, so you do not want it crowding shorter plants or shading them out. The surprising benefit is the strength of the flavor. Because it is so concentrated, a little goes a long way, which means even a single plant outlasts your needs by a wide margin, and a hollow lovage stem even makes a fun, fragrant straw for a tomato drink. Number 4. Skirret. Skirret is an old-fashioned root vegetable that almost disappeared, and it is exactly the kind of forgotten crop that veteran growers are bringing back. It is hardy across roughly zones 4 through 8, grows to around 4 feet tall, and produces clusters of sweet starchy roots that taste a little like a sweeter, nuttier parsnip or carrot. Centuries ago, this was a common vegetable on the table, and then the potato pushed it aside. But for someone trying to feed themselves off a permanent garden, it is a gem worth rediscovering. The budget value is in the permanence. Where a carrot or a parsnip is a one-and-done annual you replant every single year, skirret is a perennial. You establish it once, and it keeps sending up roots for you to dig season after season. The planting tip is all about timing the harvest. Skirret roots are best dug late in the fall, after a frost has hit the plant, because that cold sweetens the roots and makes them taste their best. The surprising benefit is that natural sweetness. These roots are sweet enough on their own that they were once used in desserts, so you are getting a starchy, filling vegetable with a built-in sweetness you do not have to add a thing to. If you are getting ideas for that one neglected corner of your yard, do me a favor and subscribe. This channel puts out budget gardening and self-sufficiency guides like this every week, and there is a lot more coming on growing your own food for less. Number 3. Sea kale. Sea kale is a perennial that grew wild along rough, windy coastlines, which tells you everything about how tough it is. If a plant can survive salt spray, sandy soil, and ocean wind, it can survive a corner of your garden with very little help from you. It comes back every year and gives you a harvest in spring, and like the others on this list, it is a one-time planting that keeps on producing. The thing that makes sea kale special is what you harvest and how. In early spring, you blanch the new shoots, which simply means you cover them to block the light as they emerge, and that turns them pale, tender, and mild, almost like a cross between asparagus and tender greens. It is a delicacy, the kind of fresh spring vegetable you would pay a premium for if you could even find it, and you grow it for free off a plant that lives for years. The planting tip is to give it well-drained soil and a sunny spot, since its coastal nature means it hates sitting in wet ground. The surprising benefit is that toughness itself. Sea kale is one of those plants that thrives on neglect, so once it is established, it asks almost nothing of you while it feeds you every spring. Number 2. Globe artichoke. The globe artichoke is the showstopper of the edible perennials, those big silvery plants that produce the artichokes you would otherwise pay top dollar for at the store. And I want to be straight with you about this one, because getting it right depends entirely on where you live. The globe artichoke is a reliable perennial only in warm regions, roughly zones 7 through 11, where winters stay mild. In those areas, you plant it once, and it sends up a fresh crop of artichokes every year for several years. In colder zones, the story is different. Up north, the winters are simply too hard for it to survive in the ground, so gardeners there grow it as an annual, or give it heavy winter protection to try to carry it through. So before you plant it expecting a perennial, be honest about your climate. If you are in a warm enough zone, the payoff is excellent, because store-bought artichokes are expensive, and a single established plant produces a steady supply. The planting tip is that the artichoke is a heavy feeder that wants rich soil and full sun, so dig in plenty of compost before planting. And the surprising benefit, if you ever let one go unharvested, is the flower. An artichoke left on the plant opens into an enormous striking purple thistle bloom that the bees adore, so even a missed harvest gives you something beautiful. Number 1. Sunchokes. I am ending with sunchokes, also called Jerusalem artichokes, because they might be the most productive food plant on this entire list, and because they come with one warning you absolutely need to hear. Sunchokes are grown for their tubers, knobby underground roots that taste a bit like a nutty, slightly sweet potato and store energy the same way. They are wildly productive. One planting gives you a heavy harvest of tubers in the fall, and because you can never quite dig every single one, the ones you miss sprout again next spring. You will never replant these, because the tubers you miss make sure of it. And that is exactly the warning. Sunchokes are vigorous to the point of being aggressive. If you plant them in an open bed with your other vegetables, they will take over the whole thing, and you will be fighting them for years. So you contain them, plant them in a dedicated spot of their own, hemmed in by a path or a lawn you mow, or sink a barrier into the ground around them, and treat that area as the sunchoke patch and nothing else. Do that and you have an almost unkillable source of food. The plant itself grows tall, sometimes 8 feet or more, with cheerful yellow sunflower blooms in late summer, so it doubles as a privacy screen. And the surprising benefit beyond the harvest is just how dependable it is. In hard times, this is the kind of crop that simply does not quit, feeding you year after year whether you tend it or not. So there is your 9. Asparagus and rhubarb that outlive the family dog and then some, sorrel and sea kale and walking onions that beat you to the first harvest every spring, lovage and skirret and the warm zone artichoke that quietly replace things you have been buying for years, and the sunchoke that you genuinely cannot get rid of in the best possible way. Notice what they all have in common. You plant once. And then, while everyone else is back at the garden center, every spring reloading on seed packets and seedlings, your food garden is already awake and working, season after season, year after year, asking almost nothing and feeding you anyway. That is not just a smarter way to garden. It is a small, steady way to stop letting grocery prices tell you what spring costs. Pick 2 or 3 of these, get them in the ground this year, and let your future self do the harvesting. If this gave you a few ideas worth digging into, take a second to subscribe, because there are plenty more stories like this on the channel.